So let's talk Inkscape theory. Not a lot of doing in this, a lot of learning how, what, why we're doing what we're doing. So what is the outcome of this stage of our project? Ultimately, what we're doing is we're making a two-dimensional layered file that's going to represent the things that make a golf course, all right? The shapes and the locations of the tee boxes, shapes and locations of fairways, of greens, of rough, of deep rough, water bodies, bunkers. I don't have bunkers listed in there, but everything that you think when you look at a golf course from above, what makes it a golf course? We need a way of getting that into our environment. So we're going to trace a lot of these things using a satellite image. We're going to use that outcome of that is going to be an Inkscape file, which we call an SVG, and we can leverage it to do two things. One is we're going to pull that image, that file, which shows where our tee boxes and everything is, back into Unity, and then we can kind of use that to uh, uh, work on our terrain so that we'll go and say, okay, our tee boxes are here. Well, tee box should be flat. Okay, so maybe our LiDAR isn't exactly perfect and we need to shape that LiDAR and put some touches on it. So we're going to pull that into terrain. We're also going to need to do things like, hey, there's water here, but we're going to need to dig out that water so we can make a pond because in our LiDAR, that's flat. So we might need to dig that out. We might need to dig out a little stream or a creek or a river. And what we can do is once we have all that in Inkscape, we can pull it back into Unity and use it as kind of a template to start digging and altering our terrain that you already have inside of Unity. The second thing that we do is we take that Inkscape file, that SVG, and all those shapes, we bring them into Blender and we have our terrain inside of Blender. Remember, our terrain is how our elevation is. And we're going to drop those 2D images onto the terrain and we're going to have them conform to it so that we create 3D shapes out of that called meshes. And then those meshes are brought back into Unity, and that's what we're going to plant our trees on. We're going to put our grass on there. We're going to assign materials to it so the ball interacts with it. So ultimately, we're trying to take a 2D representation of our golf course and make a 3D object or objects out of that. So we need to learn some concepts here in Inkscape, and these are all Inkscape specific. We're going to make shapes, okay? Our shapes like a tee box will become a shape. Our semi-rough, our fairways will be a shape. And we're going to put those into holes. Now, don't confuse holes here with like hole one on your course has to have all the shapes from hole one have to be in the hole one in Inkscape. That's not the case. They're just organizational containers. Okay, your holes in real life can actually span multiple holes in Inkscape and probably will. And I'm going to show you some examples. I know this is hard to understand, but I'll show you some examples. A single shape can be a member of one hole in Inkscape only. So a tee box can't be a member of hole one and hole two, or hole three and hole four. It can only be in a single hole. And as shapes contained in one hole cannot overlap with shapes in another hole. So if you create a fairway that's contained in hole two, that fairway cannot overlap with any other shapes in hole three, right? Shape order is extremely important. So shapes on top will cut through the shapes beneath them. And the idea of cutting will become clear in Blender, but you need to know that if one shape is on top of each other, the one that's on top is going to cut the shape underneath it. So if they overlap, and remember, they have to be in the same hole though. They can't be overlapping on different holes. Any shapes in the bottom, like and this makes sense, will be cut by the shapes above them. So in other words, the order how you do these, and you can move them around, but the order is really important. When we create holes, you don't have to do hole 1 through 18, and most likely you aren't. As a matter of fact, you definitely will not be doing just hole 1 through 18. And you could be missing holes. You could do hole 1, 2, 5, 8, the way that your course is laid out, because you might have multiple holes in real life contained within a single hole inside of Inkscape, okay? Holes 98 and 99 are special. and they're leveraged for very particular things. First of all, they're special in that they're the only one holes that the shapes within those can span across other holes. And this is going to be a hard concept to explain until I show you. But the thing that's special about hole 98 is anything you put in hole 98 will cut through everything it touches. So if it spans multiple holes, it'll cut through all the shapes that it touches. And then anything in hole 99 will be cut by everything it touches. So it almost like sits on the bottom of everything. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, let's try to clear this up a little bit more. So if you think about it, hole 98, it's going to be really useful for cart paths because your cart paths tend to go over your entire course and you can't contain them to a single hole. A cart path might span 5, 6, 7, maybe all of your holes. So putting them in 98 is very useful because it'll be on top of everything in your course, and that cart path and that shape will cut everything underneath it. Now, hole 99 is useful for filling the gaps between your holes. So if you have hole 1 and 2, hole 99 is useful for filling the gap between those holes, and it's typically what we call deep rough. Water is kind of unique, and it can be put on a specific hole. For example, you could put it on hole 1 or hole 9 if it's contained in that hole. But if it's a large body, it might make sense to put it on hole 98 so that it cuts through all the shapes underneath it. For example, if it spans multiple holes, it might make sense to put it on 98 so it cuts all the shapes underneath it. Items in these holes, 98 and 99, they cannot overlap with each other. So they have to be very distinct. You can't have a cart path touching a water body that's in hole 98. They have to be completely separate. There are ways to work around that, but those are more advanced topics. So I'm going to pause the video here, and the next video I do will be an example of a Inkscape finished project, so you guys get an idea.